Hi, I'm Melissa Muir. In this video I'm going to show you how to make a fun little pair of earrings with nothing more than jump rings. To make my jump rings, I'm going to be using Pepe's Jump Ring Maker, and it's a great tool for helping to speed up the process, and also if you're going to do anything with larger production, it'll definitely be a tool you'll want to have in your studio. For this project, we need 4 different sizes of rings, and what I like to do is make a whole bunch of jump rings, and then I will label and store them all in little baggies like this, and that makes it so that it's easy for me to see very quickly what's in there. I already happen to have some of the jump rings made for this particular project, so I won't need to do those, but I do need to make some, the 9mm in 14 gauge, 4.5 and 4mm both in 18 gauge. Pepe Tools has recently redesigned their jump ring making system, so this is what they consider the Jump Ring Maker 2 or JMR2, and that's what we're going to be using for this particular project. It comes with everything that you need in a very compact setup, which I really like that everything is just right here together. I already happen to have my blade installed into my arbor. The thing that you want to remember with your blade is that the text that is on your blade needs to face down towards the arbor itself, so that you'll make sure that you have that in the correct position. Tighten up the little screw up here on the top with just a Phillips head screwdriver. We're going to install this first into our handpiece. Let me grab that here. So obviously remove anything else that might be in there. The arbor is a little bit thicker as far as the mandrel on it, so open up your flex shaft, slip this in, and tighten it back up. Now, because you never want to have a blade like this just sitting out, because that really is quite frightening, they've also included a little sheath that you can slip your handpiece into, like so. There are lines here all the way around the side of the top of this arbor. This is kind of your guideline, and all you need to do is just get your blade lined up with that line. Use the little Allen wrench that comes with your kit to attach that, and now I can attach this back onto my flex shaft, and it is ready to go when I've got my coils made and are ready to be cut. I have already determined the size of jump rings that I need. For my 14 gauge wire, I need to make a 9mm inner diameter ring, so I'm going to select my 9mm mandrel. For both of the 18 gauge rings, I need both the 4 and a 4.5mm mandrel. So I will just pull these out, lay them aside with their wires so that I know what to do when it comes time to coiling these. In my case, I have chosen to have my winder attached to the base. You will have an alternative option where you can take and attach your base to this disc and then mount this disc onto your bench top if you have a need for a permanent solution on that. Mine doesn't need to be permanent, so I've opted to just attach it to my base, and then I can just move my base around wherever I need to and wrap my coils that way. I find that it is necessary to stabilize this if you are going to use it in that manner. So I happen to have a lip, and I'll zoom out just a little bit here for you so you can see this. I have a little bit of a lip, a raised edge on my tabletops. So what I like to do is just bring that forward and pull it tight against my tabletop. And then I still need to have some way of stabilizing this other side. And in this case, my drill press is really close by. So I can just pull that forward and kind of sandwich things. And that allows me to wind this and not have too much movement going on with my base plate. Now we're ready to get this going. I have loaded my mandrel into the winder here, but I've left open this little hole right here just so that I can easily slip my wire into that hole, and that will allow me to have some leverage on this, and it will go through and pull my wire around by having that there in that hole. Now, another thing that I like to do is kind of polish up this wire as I'm going. So I will take just a little polishing pad, and as I wind this, I will pull it through this polishing pad. That will brighten all of my jump rings while it's coiling and also hardening it. We're ready now, so what I'm going to do is hold my wire in between this polishing pad. I'll polish up here just a little bit. And now I'm ready to pull this and start to wind. I am giving this a little bit of counter pull just so that I make certain that everything lines up nicely as it coils around. You want to keep your coil as tight as possible. And we had a little bit of a kink in that wire to begin with, so it kind of pulled out of shape right there. So at this point, I've got several really good coils or rings that I will be able to get out of this. And you can just use your finger or a pair of pliers or whatever you might want to kind of push that down. You can also try to push the coil together, but the best thing to do is to get this tight in the first place. So at this point, I'm now ready to release my coil from the winder, or the mandrel anyway. I'm going to take my cutters and I'm going to just cut right here at the hole, and that will allow me to slip my coil off. I can then clip away any excess like so, and now I have my coil that is ready to be cut. I need to do this for the remaining 2 pieces of wire, but what I wanted to show you is once you hit that 4mm, so the 4, 3, 3.5, and 2.5 millimeters, mandrels do not have holes. They were too small to do that. So what you do is you actually just feed your wire with the end of your mandrel into that winder and then clamp it in that way, and then you're able to do your rolling, and it will still create that nice tight coil for you. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the rest of these coils, and I'll get on to the part where we cut them. Sometimes when I've got these smaller mandrels where there is no hole, I find it's necessary or easier for me to just kind of wrap it around a little bit, and then I can take the winder in and clamp and close right around this part of the coil, and that will hold everything in. When I've had to clamp in my wire, because of the way that it's in there, sometimes it makes it so that the mandrel isn't quite straight, but as long as you are diligent in just laying that wire right next to the last coil, then everything will turn out just fine. Like I said, I just kind of guide it with my hands to make certain that everything goes where it needs to. Here I have my last 2 coils, so I've got my 4 and my 4.5mm mandrels. Just again going to snip off the ends of these, pull these off. Here's where I've clamped this particular coil into that winder. It's a little bit damaged, so I'm just going to snip that off as well. Again, clip here where it was in the hole, and I can slip off my coil, and again clip the end where it didn't quite finish wrapping. And now we're ready to cut our coils. This is probably the most fun part of using your jump ring system. Not just creating the coils, because that's kind of fun, but cutting them is a lot of fun and very easy. What you're going to do is just remove the little nuts that are here on the coil holder. We have our guide here that's got the hole in it that's going to guide your blade where to cut. So here in the holder you've got a couple of springs. You want to be careful to not lose those springs, because that's what kind of helps hold some tension onto our pieces when we're cutting them. There is a little stopping point right here at the end, and what you'll do is just take your coil and butt it right up against that. Place your guide back onto the holder and screw the nuts back down. And now we are ready to cut. Again, I find that it's very helpful to have this mounted somewhere so that it doesn't move around on you while you are cutting. So for me, I like to take it and again just bring it to the edge of my table here where I have a little bit of a lip, and that gives me enough of I guess some tension here so that I don't move this around as I'm pulling the blade down to cut the rings. Before you put your rings in, you do want to add a lubricant. That was one step that I missed. So I'm just going to take my lubricant and just rub it right onto the rings themselves where the cutting is going to happen. And I'll just slip this back here into my holder, slip it back down to the edge, tighten it back up, and we'll be ready to go. When you're ready to cut your rings, like I said, place your holder here so that it can come up against something so that as you pull it, then it's not going to move around and you're not going to lose the friction on that. You want to take your blade and just fit it in here, make certain that it's all aligned properly. And you'll see that this line here that's on the guide or the sheath is actually going to line up here with our guide. You want to make certain that you don't have your rings touching your blade when you begin. My rings actually start back here, so you'll see that I have some room here. And the reason for that is because you actually want your blade to go and be running before you actually hit in to cut your rings. You don't want to have it up against your rings when you start to cut because it'll kind of jam things up a little bit. Now, some people will run their flex shafts at full speed. I don't. I want to make sure that there's enough speed that I can cut through my rings, but I don't like to run mine full speed. So I kind of have like a middle of, kind of a moderate speed going. When you pull your rings or your blade to your rings, you don't want to cut too fast either. So I've got a moderate speed on my blade going, but then as I come towards my blade, or my rings rather, then I'm going to kind of go slow. Start up your motor and get things going first, and then move it into your rings. And make sure you let your motor stop before you pull out of that guide. At this point, then you can open up the holder and tip your finished rings out. So I'm going to do that for the other two gauges as well, and then we'll start to make our earrings. One thing I like to do immediately is move them into their assigned bag, and that way I don't have to sit and try to figure out which diameter goes to what bag or whatever. So just take care of that before you move on to cutting anything else. You can easily see how nice this tool is to have. It makes a very quick work of larger productions of rings. I didn't do that very big of a coil, so it's not that many rings here, but that's just because I didn't need quite so many. You can make your coils up to about 3.5 inches long and get as many rings off of that as you can. For each pair of earrings, we are going to need a couple of different things. We need 2 of the 14 gauge 9mm rings. We need 2 of the 18 gauge 4mm rings, 4 of the 18 gauge 4.5mm rings, and we need 3 of the 5.5mm rings. Those are 16 gauge. So everything is kind of going to be attached to this larger ring or fit inside of it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this ring. The important thing to remember with jump rings when you are closing them is that you want to work with a twisting action to get that seam so that it's closed. If you are in the right place, you should be able to feel and hear it kind of clicking as you're closing that. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm also going to close these 2 4mm rings because they are just going to sit inside of this, and everything else again is going to be connected to these. So we don't really need these open at this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is attach these inside of our ring here, and I'm going to use 2 of my 5.5mm rings to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and come in and open it rather, not close it yet. So we need to open this up. We're going to feed all 3 rings onto this 5mm ring. Come back in here, close that up, and just make sure that you've got a good tight fit on your join. Going to do the same thing for the next 5mm ring. Open this up, feed the 2 small rings and the larger ring. I want to make certain that I don't accidentally feed through this other 5.5mm ring. Okay, so now we have something that looks like this. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to feed another 5mm ring into this, actually our 4mm ring, 4.5mm, sorry. So we're going to take the 4.5mm ring and feed it through the 2 small ones and the large ring, as well as one of our 5mm rings that's left over. This will become our bail. So I'm just going to close this 5.5mm ring. Going to take one of the 4.5mm rings, open it up, feed through our 5.5mm, feed through the large one, and then also feed the 2 smaller rings. And close all of that up. So now we should have something that looks kind of like this. So the next thing I'm going to do with my remaining 3 4.5mm rings, I'm going to attach them to the large ring and the large ring only, and I'm just going to sandwich these 5.5mm rings that are here on the large one. And again, it's just the large one that we're feeding onto. And I'm going to place it in between my 2 5.5mm rings. And our final one just goes on the outside of that. And now we have our earring. We just need to create our ear wire and attach that, and you're ready to go. This leaves itself open to a lot of different interpretations or variations. You can drop some beads off of that. Instead of doing these rings, you could just drop some beads there if you'd like to. You can also just reverse this and then make another link and connect them and end up with a bracelet. There's just a lot that you can do. But it's really nice knowing that I have a very easy way to make all of these jump rings very quickly, very economically, and I know that they're the size that I was after because I created them myself. Here I've just created a couple of really fast earrings. If you'd like to see more on how to do some of these designs, check out my YouTube page. I have a couple of different tutorials on making matching earring or ear wires. I'm just going to twist this open like I do a jump ring. Slip that top ring into this, twist it back closed again so that it's nice and tight. Same thing for the other pair. And now we have our earrings.